January 3, 2026. The place, a federal holding cell in Brooklyn, New York. The prisoner, Nicolás Maduro, former president of Venezuela. But here's what you need to understand before the history books tell the story, before the documentaries roll, before the political talking heads dissect what happened. This wasn't just about military force. Those handcuffs didn't appear overnight. They were forged slowly, meticulously, over a decade of economic decisions so catastrophically bad, so fundamentally disconnected from reality, that they turned the richest nation in South America into a case study in how to destroy everything. Imagine this. You're sitting on 300 billion barrels of oil, the largest proven reserves on planet Earth. More than Saudi Arabia. More than Russia. More than anybody. You have paradise beaches that should rival the Caribbean. You have fertile soil that could feed the continent. You have an educated population ready to build industries. You have every conceivable advantage. And then you do the impossible. You lose 80% of your economy in less than a decade. You turn a coffee into a $3 million purchase. You watch your citizens lose an average of 19 pounds, not from dieting but from starvation. You force 1 in 4 of your people to flee the country, walking through deadly jungles just to escape your paradise. How do you lose $100 billion without a single bomb falling? How do you make money so worthless that people weave purses out of the bills because the craft value exceeds the face value? Today we're not just examining an arrest. We're conducting a forensic audit of the most spectacular financial suicide in modern peacetime history. This is the economy that nailed Maduro. This is the final verdict. To understand why Maduro ended up in that Brooklyn cell, we need to rewind to 2013. Hugo Chavez has just died. Nicolás Maduro, a former bus driver turned politician, takes the wheel of a country that looks prosperous on paper but is already smoking under the hood. Venezuela's oil reserves, 300 billion barrels. That's a geological lottery ticket. A gift from deep beneath the earth that should have guaranteed prosperity for generations. But here's the brutal truth about oil wealth. It's a jealous god that demands sacrifice. The economists call it Dutch disease, named after what happened to the Netherlands when they discovered natural gas in the North Sea. The simple version: when you make massive amounts of money selling one thing, your currency gets super strong. A strong currency makes imports incredibly cheap. So why grow tomatoes when you can buy them from Brazil for pennies? Why manufacture cars when you can import Toyotas? Why build anything when you can just pump oil and buy everything else? Venezuela stopped making things. They stopped farming. They stopped manufacturing. The entire economy became a one-trick pony, pumping oil and importing everything from toilet paper to medical equipment. When oil was $100 a barrel, it worked. Was a party. A lavish, drunken, endless celebration of petrodollars flowing in and goods flowing out. But Maduro inherited more than just an oil addiction. He inherited a broken pump. Years before, in a moment that would doom the nation, the government had committed economic suicide disguised as political loyalty. When PDVSA workers, the engineers and geologists who actually knew how to extract oil, went on strike in 2002, the government fired nearly 20,000 of them. These weren't unskilled workers. These were the people who understood high-pressure subterranean systems, who knew how to maintain the complex infrastructure needed to extract heavy crude oil from Venezuelan soil. They were replaced with political loyalists, people who knew how to chant slogans at rallies but had no idea how to maintain aging pipelines or prevent equipment failures. By the time Maduro sat in the big chair, the infrastructure was rotting. Pumps were rusting. Pipelines were leaking. But he needed cash immediately to maintain the socialist programs that kept him popular, to pay off the military generals whose loyalty kept him alive, to fund the rallies where he declared economic war on imperialism. So instead of investing in maintenance, he raided the piggy bank. He treated PDVSA like a personal ATM. Need money for a political rally? Withdraw it from the oil company. Need to bribe a general? Take it from oil revenue. Need to fund social programs? Drain the maintenance budget. The result? Production collapse. When Maduro took office in 2013, Venezuela was pumping nearly 3 million barrels per day. By 2020, that number had cratered to just 337,000 barrels per day. By the time the handcuffs went on in 2026, production had struggled to stay above 800,000. Imagine you own the best bakery in town. You stop buying flour. You fire all the experienced bakers. You sell the ovens for quick cash. Then you act shocked when you have no bread to sell. That's the Maduro economic doctrine in a nutshell. He killed the golden goose, plucked it, deep-fried it, served it at a political dinner, and then wondered why it stopped laying eggs. This is the first nail in the coffin. Production collapse turned Venezuela's greatest asset into a curse. The year is 2014. Oil prices crash globally. From over $100 a barrel to below $50. Suddenly the ATM is empty. The government still has billions in obligations, social programs, subsidies, military salaries, debt payments. A normal government would have options. Raise taxes. Cut spending. Negotiate with creditors. Implement austerity measures. These are painful, politically unpopular choices. But they're economically sound. Maduro looked at these options and said, "No. I have a better idea." He walked into the Central Bank of Venezuela and essentially said, "Print it." What followed wasn't just inflation. It was hyperinflation on a scale that defies comprehension. It was economic velocity that broke every speedometer, shattered every model, and entered the record books alongside Zimbabwe and Weimar Germany. Let's examine the numbers because they genuinely strain belief. 2013, inflation hits 56%. Worrying but manageable with proper policy. 2015, 180%. The warning sirens are screaming. 2016, 254%. The dam is cracking. 2017, 863%. The dam breaks. 2018, the Central Bank of Venezuela estimates 130,060%. The IMF puts it at over 1.7 million%. Some estimates for early 2019 suggest it exceeded 2 million%. Let me make this tangible. Imagine you go to sleep on Monday. An egg costs $1. By Friday morning, that same egg costs $3,000. Prices weren't changing by the year or even the month. They were changing by the hour. Restaurant owners stopped printing menus with prices because the cost of your appetizer and main course could double by the time dessert arrived. Waiters would quote prices verbally, checking with the kitchen constantly for updates. The bolivar, Venezuela's currency, became literally worthless. It was cheaper to use the bills as napkins than to buy napkins with them. Creative Venezuelans started weaving handbags and crafts out of currency because the artistic value exceeded the monetary value. People needed wheelbarrows of cash to buy basic groceries, when groceries were even available. The government's response? Pure delusion wrapped in blame. Maduro declared an economic war. He blamed shopkeepers for raising prices. He blamed the CIA. He blamed capitalist parasites. He blamed everyone except himself and the money printer running 24/7 in the basement of the central bank. He sent military units to force shopkeepers to sell goods at government-mandated prices. "Sell this TV for $10, the soldiers would command. So the shopkeeper would sell the TV for $10, and then have no money to buy a new TV to stock the shelf. The stores went empty. This is the second nail. The destruction of currency destroyed trust. An economy runs on one fundamental principle: trust. Trust that this piece of paper is worth something. Trust that if I sell goods today I can buy goods tomorrow. Trust that my labor today will be rewarded tomorrow." Maduro took that trust and burned it to ashes. By destroying the currency, he turned every transaction into a panic attack. People spent their paychecks within minutes of receiving them, buying anything: tires, rice, bleach, because holding money was like holding melting ice in the sun. But if you think losing your life savings is tragic, wait until you hear what happened to the food supply. Because when money dies, hunger rises. And that's where this story transforms from an economic tragedy into a humanitarian horror show. In 2016, a dark joke started circulating on the streets of Caracas. People called it the Maduro diet. The punchline: it definitely makes you skinny but it doesn't make you fit. Nobody was laughing because humor becomes a survival mechanism when you're starving. According to the Incovi survey, a major university study conducted in Venezuela, in 2016 alone, nearly 75% of the population lost an average of 19 pounds. Not because they joined gyms. Not because they were doing intermittent fasting. They lost weight because they were skipping meals. Entire meals. Multiple meals per day. This is nail number 3, the weaponization of scarcity. When the economy crashed and the currency became toilet paper, supermarket shelves went bare. But the Maduro government found a solution. They created something called the clap boxes. Local committees for supply and production. This cardboard box became the most powerful political weapon in the country. On paper, the CLAP program sounds humanitarian. The government would deliver subsidized food packages directly to households. Boxes containing basics like rice, pasta, powdered milk, cooking oil. Relief for a starving population. In reality, it was a leash. A control mechanism. Political survival through food rationing. If you protested against Maduro, no box for you. If you didn't sign the party registration list, no box for you. If you lived in a neighborhood that voted for the opposition, maybe the delivery truck breaks down that week. Indefinitely. But the forensic audit reveals something even darker. This wasn't just about political control. It was about theft on a grotesque scale. Remember Alex Saab? He was Maduro's financial fixer, the Colombian businessman who was eventually arrested and swapped in a prisoner exchange with the United States in 2023. Investigations revealed that the government was importing low-quality food, often unfit for human consumption, at massive markups. They were buying powdered milk from Mexico that had virtually no nutritional value, billing the Venezuelan state millions of dollars, and pocketing the difference. While Venezuelan children were fainting in schools from malnutrition, while doctors reported patients dying from preventable diseases exacerbated by hunger, the regime's inner circle was getting wealthy off the very starvation they created. They turned hunger into a business model. Think about the level of cynicism required for that calculation. You destroy the farms so people can't grow food. You destroy the currency so they can't buy food. You import worthless food at inflated prices. And then you say, "Don't worry, I'll feed you if you kneel." This economic crime accomplished something the opposition parties never could. It broke the spirit of the working class. You cannot fight a revolution on an empty stomach. You cannot organize protests when you're spending 18 hours a day searching for your next meal. The weaponization of hunger kept Maduro in power longer than any election ever could. When a house is on fire, you don't debate the architectural merits of the foundation. You jump out the window. By 2018, Venezuela wasn't just on fire, it was an inferno consuming everything in its path. And the Venezuelan people made a choice. If they couldn't vote Maduro out with ballots, they would vote with their feet. This is nail number 4, the human capital hemorrhage. Since 2014, approximately 7.7 million Venezuelans have fled the country. That's roughly 25% of the entire population. Let me contextualize that number. Imagine if every single person in Texas packed up and left. Or if the entire country of Switzerland was emptied overnight. This is the largest displacement crisis in the history of the Western Hemisphere. At certain points, it exceeded Syria's refugee crisis, and Syria was in the middle of a civil war with barrel bombs falling on civilian neighborhoods. Venezuela achieved a worse refugee crisis than active war zones, through economic policy alone. And who left? Everyone. But especially the people you need to run a modern country. Doctors, engineers, teachers, oil technicians, electricians, nurses, the educated middle class. Picture a hospital in Caracas in 2019. The power goes out because the electrical grid has collapsed. The backup generator doesn't work because spare parts were stolen and sold on the black market. The surgeon who could have saved your life? He's in Miami washing dishes in a restaurant, because his surgeon's salary in Venezuela dropped to $6 per month. $6 per month. This is the hidden cost that ultimately nailed Maduro. He didn't just lose money. He lost the human capital needed to fix the money. When the oil rigs broke down, the engineers who knew how to repair them were in Houston, working for American energy companies. When the power grid collapsed, the electrical engineers were in Madrid. When hospitals needed doctors, they had fled to Colombia, Brazil, Chile, the United States. He was left ruling a country of ghosts, the elderly, and the desperate. The exodus reached biblical proportions. Hundreds of thousands of people walked, literally walked, through the Darien Gap, one of the most dangerous jungles on earth, where drug traffickers and criminal gangs operate, where poisonous snakes and disease kill regularly. They walked through this nightmare because it seemed safer than staying in Venezuela. This mass migration did 2 critical things. First, it temporarily relieved pressure. Fewer mouths to feed meant less immediate crisis. But second, it humiliated the regime on the global stage. You can scream socialist paradise from every podium. You can hold rallies where thousands wave flags. But when 25% of your population would rather risk death in a jungle than remain in your paradise, the verdict writes itself. And those millions of exiled Venezuelans became the loudest, most effective lobby against Maduro. They were the voices in foreign capitals, telling their stories, pressuring governments to intervene. They were sending remittances, $20, $50, $100 at a time, literally keeping their families alive from abroad while simultaneously begging the world to help end the nightmare. But if you think people leaving was the final collapse, you're missing the moment when Venezuela went from economic disaster to complete civilizational failure. The moment the lights went out. Literally. Imagine this scenario. You're in an elevator riding up to the 20th floor. You're in a subway train deep underground. You're a surgeon, scalpel in hand, about to make a life-saving incision. And then click. March 2019. Venezuela went dark. Not for an hour. Not for a day. For nearly a week. The Great Blackout. The Guri Dam, one of the largest hydroelectric facilities in the world, supplying 80% of the country's electricity, failed completely. Maduro's explanation? A cybernetic attack orchestrated by the United States and Senator Marco Rubio, who allegedly hacked the dam from a laptop in Washington. He blamed electromagnetic pulse weapons. He blamed sabotage. He blamed everything except the truth. The engineers who remained, the few who hadn't fled the country, knew what really happened: negligence. Pure, simple criminal negligence. Remember those 20,000 fired oil workers? The same thing happened to the electrical grid. They stopped cutting the grass around substations, leading to fires. They stopped replacing worn turbines. They stopped maintaining transformers. They let the system rot until physics took over and it simply quit. This is nail number 5, infrastructure apocalypse. It wasn't just the lights. When electricity dies in a modern society, everything dies with it. Water pumps stopped. In a tropical country where temperatures hit 90 degrees Fahrenheit regularly, there was suddenly no water coming from taps. No air conditioning. No fans. People were seen scooping water from the Gare River, essentially an open sewer, just to flush toilets or wash clothes. Hospitals became death traps. Neonatal incubators turned off, leaving premature babies fighting for life without life support. Dialysis machines stopped, leaving kidney patients to die slowly. Refrigeration failed, destroying medicine and vaccines. We will never know the exact death toll from those 5 days, but doctors reported patients dying simply because the machines keeping them alive had no power. The state had failed to provide the 2 most basic requirements of civilization: light and water. This was the moment the economy stopped being about abstract numbers on spreadsheets and became a direct, physical threat to life itself. This was when Venezuelans realized their government couldn't provide even the most fundamental services. And yet, in a twist of irony that would make a Hollywood writer wince, the regime found a way to survive. By 2020, Venezuela had entered the twilight zone. Walk down one street in Caracas and you see people digging through trash bags for food scraps. Turn the corner to the next street and you see a shiny new store, a bodegon, selling Nutella, imported champagne, PlayStation 5 consoles and Kirkland signature vitamins. This is nail number 6, the zombie economy. After years of screaming "Yankee go home," after years of denouncing American imperialism, Maduro did the unthinkable. He quietly, without fanfare or official announcement, legalized the US dollar. He stopped trying to control the exchange rate because he literally couldn't anymore. The bolivar was dead, so he let the dollar flow freely. Venezuela became a 2-tier society practically overnight. Tier 1, the 95% of Venezuelans earning bolivars, which were worth essentially nothing. Teachers, nurses, bus drivers, government workers, anyone earning a salary in local currency, were condemned to poverty. Tier 2, the 5% with access to dollars. Government cronies. Military generals. People with family abroad sending remittances. Drug traffickers. Money launderers. The connected elite. This created a bubble of luxury in Caracas that gave the illusion of recovery. New restaurants opened serving $100 steaks. Casinos reopened with table minimums in dollars. Shopping centers stocked with imported goods catered to the dollar economy. Influencers started posting, "Look, Venezuela is recovering. Things are getting better." But it was a mirage. A facade. An economy built on money laundering, drug proceeds, and remittances from the diaspora. The government wasn't producing anything. They were just washing dirty money through luxury imports while 95% of the population starved. Speaking of dirty money, we need to talk about where the regime was actually getting cash to pay the military and maintain loyalty. When the oil revenue dried up and they weren't collecting taxes, where did the money come from? The answer takes us deep into the Venezuelan Amazon. When the oil dried up, Maduro looked at a map of the Venezuelan Amazon, one of the most biodiverse places on planet Earth, home to indigenous tribes that have lived there for thousands of years, and said, "Dig it up." He created the Orinoco Mining Arc, a zone bigger than Portugal, open for gold mining. But this wasn't industrial mining with environmental controls and safety standards. This was the Wild West. Actually, that's too kind. This was hell on earth. This is nail number 7, the gangster economy. The regime handed control of these mines to a toxic mixture of military units and actual criminal syndicates. Colombian guerrilla groups like the ELN operated openly. Armed gangs controlled access. They used mercury, toxic, poisonous mercury, to separate gold from dirt. That mercury flows into rivers, poisoning water supplies for indigenous communities, killing fish, destroying ecosystems that will take centuries to recover. The gold is extracted using slave labor in many cases. Then it's flown out on private planes to places like Turkey, the UAE, or Iran. It's sold for cash off the books. No receipts. No taxes. No transparency. Just bags of physical cash delivered to the presidential palace to keep the inner circle happy. This is crucial to understand. By 2024 and 2025, Venezuela wasn't functioning as a state anymore. It was a criminal enterprise wearing a state's costume. The economy wasn't based on GDP or productivity or trade. It was based on extraction. Extract the remaining oil. Extract the gold. Extract money from desperate migrants. Extract hope. But even organized crime has limits. Eventually you run out of things to steal. Eventually you run out of friends willing to protect you. Which brings us to the final months before the arrest, the election that wasn't, and the mistake that finally closed the trap. If you followed international news in 2023 and early 2024, you might have heard whispers of hope. Rumors that Venezuela was fixing itself. Inflation had slowed down slightly. Oil production increased marginally because the United States had eased some sanctions through the Chevron license. There was a deal on the table, the Barbados Agreement. The terms were straightforward. Hold a free and fair election in July 2024, and the world will let you sell oil again. The economy could breathe. Sanctions could be lifted. Foreign investment could return. This is nail number 8, the opportunity cost of ego. July 28, 2024. Election Day. The opposition candidate Edmundo Gonzalez didn't just perform well in polls, he crushed it. Exit polls showed a 70-30 split in many regions. International observers saw a clear mandate for change. The Venezuelan people voted decisively for a new direction. Maduro had a choice. Option A, accept defeat gracefully. Negotiate an amnesty deal that would protect him from prosecution. Retire to a beach in Turkey with his millions stashed in foreign accounts. Let the country recover. Let oil production restart. Let foreign investment flow back. Let the sanctions be lifted. Option B, steal the election. Refuse to show the voting tallies. Arrest protesters. Declare himself the winner despite overwhelming evidence. Doom the economy to eternal isolation. He chose option B. He announced he had won. He refused to provide voting tallies to verify results. He sent security forces to arrest protesters. And just like that, the economic lifeline was severed. The United States said, "Deal's off." Sanctions snapped back into place harder than before. The foreign investors who had been cautiously returning packed their bags and fled. The Chevron license was revoked. The oil couldn't flow to markets. This is the moment the verdict was truly sealed. Because until 2024, Maduro could plausibly blame imperialism. He could claim sanctions were the cause of Venezuela's suffering. But in 2024 he was handed a golden key to unlock those sanctions, to save his country, to end the crisis. And he threw that key into the river. He proved to the world, and more importantly to his own military, that as long as he was in charge Venezuela would never make money again. He was the blockage in the pipe. The obstacle to recovery. The reason foreign companies wouldn't invest. And when a general can't pay his troops because the president is radioactive to the global economy, loyalty starts to rust. Now we arrive at the darkest chapter of the audit. When the oil economy died and the gold economy wasn't generating enough, the state turned to the most profitable commodity in South America: cocaine. This is nail number 9, the criminalization of the state. For years, U.S. investigators had been tracking what they called the cartel of the suns, Cartel de los Soles. Why suns? Because Venezuelan military generals wear sun insignias on their epaulets. The allegation, now the charge, is that the Venezuelan government essentially became the logistics department for international drug trafficking. Imagine you're a drug lord. Usually you have to hide from police. You have to evade radar. You have to bribe officials. Now imagine you are the police. You control the radar. You control the ports. You control the airports. You control the airspace. It's the perfect business model. But here's the catch. A narco-state is inherently unstable. It invites heat. The U.S. Department of Justice wasn't looking at Maduro as a politician anymore. They were looking at him like they looked at El Chapo. Like Pablo Escobar. The $15 million bounty on Maduro's head, later increased to $50 million, turned him into a walking lottery ticket. Think about the psychology. Every time Maduro walked into a room with his bodyguards, he had to wonder, does that guy want to protect me or does he want the $15 million? When the economy is bankrupt and soldiers aren't being paid, loyalty has a price tag. And $50 million is a price tag that hungry, unpaid soldiers find very attractive. This criminal economy isolated Venezuela completely. Even traditional allies started backing away. China reduced engagement. Brazil's leftist government distanced itself. Cuba couldn't help, they were broke themselves. Nobody wants to do business with someone who has an active DOJ indictment for narcoterrorism. As 2025 progressed, Maduro found himself alone. The oil money, gone. The people, fled or starving. The infrastructure, dead. The military, unpaid and tempted by bounties. The walls were closing in. The economic reality had finally cornered the political fantasy. History teaches us one undeniable lesson about dictatorships. You can survive being hated. You can survive international sanctions. You can even survive coup attempts. But you cannot survive when your own bodyguards realize they have a better future without you. Why did it happen on January 3, 2026? Because the economic math finally hit zero. Reports suggest that in the final months of 2025, cash payments to the top military brass started arriving late. Or they arrived lighter than expected. The gold mines were being squeezed by increased international pressure. Drug routes were being intercepted by aggressive U.S. patrols. The loot was running out. This brings us to the ultimate economic concept: incentive structures. For 10 years, the incentive structure was simple. Protect Maduro, get paid, stay safe from prosecution. January 3, 2026, the incentive structure flipped. Protect Maduro, go down with the ship. Or, hand him over, get a plea deal, maybe keep some of the money, maybe avoid prison. When Delta Force teams landed in Venezuela backed by massive U.S. military force, they didn't face a fanatical fight-to-the-death defense. They didn't encounter thousands of loyal troops willing to die for their leader. They faced a regime that had already hollowed itself out. The structure was rotten. One strong kick and the entire edifice collapsed. The economy didn't just weaken Maduro. It stripped him of his shield. It turned him from a leader into a liability. The generals made a calculation. Maduro was worth more arrested than protected. So here we are. Nicolás Maduro is in a cell in Brooklyn facing charges of narcoterrorism, conspiracy, and crimes against humanity. But let's be absolutely clear about what actually defeated him. It wasn't just ideology. It wasn't just political opposition. It wasn't just military intervention. It was a fundamental refusal to accept economic reality. He thought he could print wealth. He couldn't. He thought he could eat oil without maintaining the infrastructure to extract it. He couldn't. He thought he could rule over ruins forever. He couldn't. Here is the final bill of the Maduro era. 1. GDP contracted by nearly 80%, one of the worst economic collapses in peacetime history, rivaling war-torn nations. 2. Poverty exceeded 90% at its peak, with over 67% living in extreme poverty. 3. Nearly 8 million people, 25% of the population, forced into exile, creating the largest refugee crisis in Western Hemisphere history. 4. Currency hyperinflation reaching 130,000% in 2018 according to official figures, with some estimates exceeding 2,000,000%, making the bolivar literally worthless. 5. Oil production collapsed from 3 million barrels per day to under 400,000 at its lowest point. 6. Complete infrastructure failure, including nationwide blackouts lasting days. 7. Weaponized hunger that killed thousands and left an entire generation malnourished. There will be trials. There will be lawyers arguing technicalities. There will be headlines about justice and international law. But there is no courtroom big enough to hold the true scale of what Venezuelans have endured. You cannot sue for a lost decade. You cannot get a refund on a stolen childhood. You cannot put a price on the empty chairs at dinner tables where 8 million people used to sit. The economy that nailed Maduro also crucified the Venezuelan people. He may be gone. The nightmare may be over. But the waking up, the rebuilding, the healing, that's going to be the hardest work of all. Venezuela is free of the man. Now it must free itself from the wreckage he left behind. If you found this forensic deep dive valuable, make sure to like this video. It helps the algorithm understand that this kind of in-depth economic analysis matters. Hit subscribe if you want to be here for the next chapter, because trust me, the story of how Venezuela rebuilds, how they turn the lights back on, how they recover from this economic apocalypse, is going to be just as compelling as the story of how they fell. I'll see you in the comments. Let's discuss what lessons the world can learn from Venezuela's collapse. And remember, economics isn't just about money and numbers on a spreadsheet. Economics is about life, about human dignity, about whether children have enough to eat and whether hospitals have power and whether people have hope for tomorrow. The Venezuela that emerges from this nightmare will be a testament to human resilience, or a warning about how far a nation can fall when leaders choose delusion over reality.